decide how much we got to go. So I'm going to turn on the recording if that's okay.
So people that aren't here can get the recording. That's very good.
Yeah. So the first order of business is just kind of to talk about the last 2 weeks and all the try thises and the readings, and how did you do with all of those exercises with others? Which ones worked for you and which ones didn't, and how did they work? And
well, to try this, I tried talking to my mother, and she said, all the things that you hear all these years since I've been gone, she died in 1983.
okay.
She said, that was me talking to you all along.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we forget when someone passes that the way they used to see stuff absolutely is still how we are affected by. I mean, we hear through our parents' ears a lot.
Yes, exactly. But I was glad when I read her examples were people that she knew really well and had been intimate with while they were here. And so it's like she could know what they were saying, and that she did the writing as they talked to her.
Yeah.
I thought that was
amazing.
Really
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And as we look at how we let the ghosts of our past speak into our lives, that's how we all have to figure out is what do we listen to and what do we not have to listen to. One of the things I found remarkable in what she was saying is how essentially she got to not have to see their blemishes in the same way. And at the Tuesday class, we had a lady who not long ago had lost her husband. You know, and anytime you've lived with a husband or a spouse of whatever sort, you see the blemishes after a while. You know that the person you're living with is not perfect. And I think what she was expressing was, but now I get to see the better parts of him easier. I thought that was a remarkable way to think about it. Nancy, what do you think about
typical?
That? I think it is.
That is kind of typical to.
we idolize the dead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you think about not just the people we know, but like historical people too. You know, when things come out about them, you know, Washington and Jefferson, it's like, wait, what? I thought we were trained to just love them unconditionally, you know, and oh, they're human. And I think that's an important piece to remember. You know, I was at Sabino Canyon this morning, and there was a place down from the shuttle stop one. There's a creek, and it's still running. And that's where I left some of my parents. I scattered some of my parents' ashes. So I like to go there and kind of talk to them or think about them. And talking doesn't have to be out loud, but you know, I had a couple questions about this and that, and I feel sort of like an answer. And one was like, be careful. And that wasn't quite what I wanted to hear, but you know, it was probably a wise response. And I don't know where that came from exactly, but I do think that they live with you, you know. And I think the way we've always thought of death is like, oh, it's to be feared and it's awful, and you know, the skull and the guy with the sieve and everything in black, you know, like Charles Dickens, the way he portrayed the death there at the end. And yet, you know, I thought, well, maybe they're all wrong. Maybe this transition is something really wonderful, and that when you do get on the other side of the veil, people are saying, hey, this is pretty great. You're living a tougher life now than you might in the future, which is comforting.
Yeah.
You remind me of Jim's Flight, a book that Joy and Wisdom read just back a little ways, where a man, through a shaman or a medium, talked to his wife and her from the other side. Jim's Flight is the name of it if you're ever interested.
Jim Slight. Good.
You
Who's
also
it by?
reminded me of when I was a student nurse at Mountainside Hospital in Montclair, New Jersey. I ingratiated myself to the black aides because I wasn't scared to handle the dead bodies, and they were scared of them. It was as if they thought they were going to be invaded by some kind of a malevolent spirit
Yeah.
if they handled dead bodies.
See, but much of that is what we say around death. I like many of my native friends, the way they deal with death much better than I like our good Christian way of dealing with it. They have a better sense of ongoing life in that person who has passed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's at least part of what she's trying to evoke here is how does that life continue?
It's not a death, it's a transformation.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Right. Uh-huh. And just having Easter,
Yes.
you know, the
That
whole
was neat.
story of Jesus, that
Just
transformation.
died.
Yeah. It's I wanted to go back to that Jim's Flight. It's a book, and what is it about exactly, and who's it by?
Oh, I can't. I could look it up. The author.
I'll look it up while we're talking.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
okay. I can Google it. I'll find it.
But Jim is a man who died, and his wife is writing the book, and she had a medium to for Jim to communicate with them from the other side. That's the whole book.
Okay.
So the book is by Christine Frank Petosa, Pepposa.
Okay. A mouthful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Christine Frank Petosa.
Okay. Thank you.
And he was a whatchamacallit, pilot.
Pilot. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
You know, I was just talking with a woman, just lost her husband, and part of the conversation got to near-death experiences, which is what she had when she was 12 years old, died on the operating table, type of thing. Saw her father, good, strong, military, never cry father, bawling in the hallway, right? And then she told me the story of how years later, as dad's dying, she sat next to him and whispered that story into his ears. Saw one tear come from his eye as he passed into the next world.
Mm.
Right? And that sense of otherworldliness that story says is remarkable for me, because just the idea of seeing a little bit past the veil and then coming back, but then having that perspective as you go through the rest of your life, and having the perspective enough to be able to whisper to your dad that story to help him pass through the veil. It tells me that, I mean, just that word veil rather than wall, which death often feels like wall, doesn't it? And to think of the idea of a much more translucent barrier between here and there, that's a good thing for me.
Mm. The title of the chapter, the veil. Huh.
Yeah, I like that.
Yes.
I like that title because of that.
That's wonderful imagery. And yesterday, Judith, when we had the class, I used the quote from Hamlet, "There's more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy." And I just, the overwhelming awe of the universe and the all the stars and planets and our own bodies, that we don't really understand how it all works. If we don't understand it on that level, to understand on a spiritual level, what is this life force all about, and how does it manifest itself after the body, the shell, has let go of it? Far be it from me to know the answers to any of that. And yet, you know, Jim yesterday talked about turning, I think it was you, Jim, turning grief, replacing it with gratitude. And I think that's helpful in considering the other side. They're gone, but are they? You know, are they gone? Maybe in form, but certainly not in memory and in love. And that quote in the book, death ends a life, not a relationship. So I do believe those do continue on in one form or other.
Yeah. I think maybe the thing that stands in the way of that, Nancy, is that we try to make things factual too much. So we look at like the season we're passing through, the Jesus die on a cross, the resurrection. And I think we try to turn that into a factual event, that the body of Christ rose again, rather than the more magnificent, from my point of view, and more spiritual, more translucent, that Jesus continues to live, just not in the body that we used to see. And that's a different thing. It's much easier if it comes back to the hard world that's easy for me to understand. But I've felt that divine presence of the Christ. What, you know, not because I've seen a body, but because of the presence that was there. And do we allow that more mystical way of viewing it to be the way we view each other?
You remind me of the Native American saying, I don't know whether or not it's true. No, I don't know whether it or not it happened, but I know that it's true.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Yeah. I think we try to turn things into facts.
When you said about
they really
facts,
should be true.
my brain went, yes.
Yeah. Truth is a much more important thing than a fact, I think, sometimes.
Yes, yes. And myth is like that too. It's like David used to say at at the eulogies of people, that now we start the myth of this person.
The myth of this person. That's a good way to put it, isn't it? Yeah. And if you think about some of the dear ones in your life that died, their life might have been very different if they'd lived through it. Like right after my dad died, one of my hardest deaths was my dad, but partially it was because within just a couple of weeks, an 8-year-old friend of ours died.
Oh.
And Joe was magnificent while he lived, and he's even more magnificent afterwards, because I get to remember him in all the wonder. I didn't have to see him at 13 when he was a rebellious teenager, right? I get to remember him in the glory of who he was, not all the messiness.
You know, Jim, to add to that story, I just finished reading Peter Pan, the one by J.M. Barrie, you know, not the Disney version, and where he got the idea of Peter Pan was a brother that had died when he was a young boy, and he told his mother, my brother will never grow up. And that's how the story of Peter Pan came about. So it was actually from a real experience that
Isn't
this
that interesting?
author. Yeah.
And that's so like what Jim just said. That's neat.
Yeah.
And the ongoing story of how that brother continued to speak into his life.
Yes.
I pray over those people that got killed in it's not Aurora, but
Boulder.
No, before that.
Columbine.
Atlanta.
12 years ago, and I think, what would they be now? I mean, 2012.
Yeah.
How they're stuck at that age that I see there's pictures from the paper, and I don't see them grow up. That's in my mind in response to what you're saying about Peter Pan's brother and I mean J.M. Barrie's brother and the little boy after Jim's dad's death.
Yeah.
All together. And
I was very aware of that when I was speaking on Sunday about my first grade classroom. There's these little 6-year-olds, And you don't want to keep a kid as a 6-year-old,
No.
right? You want them to grow up and continue to learn and grow and become, right? But
You know what I said when I saw that picture? Look at how thin Jim is.
look at how thin Jim was back then.
Bulimic brain, Judith.
I think though what you just said about you don't want those children to stay at 6 years old, that can be true of us too. I keep thinking, well, I can't be 35 forever, but now to be 67, it's like, whoa, how that happened.
Yeah, and there's magnificent things that 29-year-old Jim was, right, in that picture, but there's
Yeah.
some really good things that have changed since then, right?
Yes, it's like the growing of a fruit. You know, you have the apple rather than just the blossom.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Yeah.
And at least
And
part of what listening beyond the veil is where somebody opens up larger story to us and helps us to become not just stuck in where we were at, but we move towards the better.
And at the time, you have no idea what the better is going to be.
You don't.
You know, I've been watching these 3 different stories on PBS. One was about Doc Severinsen, and one was about Twyla Tharp, and then Hemingway's. And, you know, you see them as young people and, you know, strong and beautiful and all these hopes and dreams. And then you see them hit different obstacles. And, you know, you could think of them as walls, but better to think of them as veils, that they permeate them and they transform the obstacles into something that's going to help them to not only grow themselves, but then become a model for other people that watch and learn from their lives.
Yeah.
That's why I've always loved biographies.
Yeah. And that at least part of what we should be hearing from Beyond the Veil is the model that they can be for us. What did my father's life teach me so that I don't have to learn it on my own?
Good.
It also is what jumping, you know, what board did he give me so I don't have to relearn the stuff that he, you know, how do I step beyond him as well? And I think that all of the angels who have gone before us want us to step beyond. They may not have in life, right? In life, maybe they thought they had the only right answer. But I think that there's a certain amount of where our ancestors want us to lead the world into this generation's need. So we have to be able to listen to them in that new way.
Being the youngest in my family, I've had the advantage of having older sisters, and I see their mistakes and learn from them. It's like, okay, I'm going to avoid that one. That's been a real advantage. But then what you're saying is looking at the whole life of someone, parents or whoever, you can learn from their mistakes, and you can learn from their courage and their bravery and them jumping off and taking adventures. I think that's admirable.
Did I tell you about my Granny Mae when I'm 14 years old?
No.
My Granny Mae was a crusty pioneer woman, and I mean that literally. She was born in the 1890s in rural Arizona, Greer, Arizona. She was born in a cabin up near the lakes up there. And she lived until space shuttles started going to, you know, taking off from this earth. But my favorite moment was when I was 14 years old, and I stayed a summer in her house as my parents went off to Australia. And she had opinions about things. And she didn't like the way that 14-year-old was trying to grow his hair out long. And she tried to bring me to Uncle John, have Uncle John cut my hair. And Big John was starting, and suddenly my grandma looked at me, saw how it was affecting me, and this woman who knew exactly how long hair should be on a boy stopped Big John and said, "No, we won't do it." And I think about that, and I think that's what our angels do as well. Maybe in life they had opinions, but as they continue to advise us, they begin to say, where is it you need to go? And they start guiding us differently than what they might have in life too.
That's a nice story.
She had empathy, huh?
She did, which you wouldn't have expected on a crusty old woman like that. She was my grumpy grandma. She was, I loved Nan dearly, but she had opinions. And I got to sit with her. Here's the nice thing is, I got to sit with her as she was dying.
Huh.
I lived just a couple blocks away. And in fact, after she died, I moved into her house for the next 2 years. And so she was a very close and real presence for me as I was going through some of the challenges of my life. In fact, she died about the time that first grade picture was taken.
Wow.
About that same time period.
When you lived in that house for 2 years, you were surrounded by all her things. How was that? Did you have the responsibility of going through them and giving them away, or what? How did that go?
There was some of it that was there. Much of it was divided as an immediate passing afterwards. A lot of it was just the sitting in a space where grandma had been there, right? Much of it was her space, and it was her coming home. And this was the block that we'd always come and visited. My grandma lived on that block my whole life, except for the time when she was in Mesa. She came down to Mesa because of her husband. But that was where grandma lived. And so her presence was always there.
Being the youngest, Nancy, did you know your grandparents?
No, not really. My father's father died when I was an infant, and then my father's mother lived with us for 7 years, but it was from when I was a baby till I was like 7, and I have very faint memories. And she had a disease that she wasn't very pleasant to be around. It wasn't Parkinson's, but Huntington's chorea, if you've heard of that before. Anyway,
say the word again.
Huntington's chorea.
Oh yes, okay, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, and anyway, that wasn't, I was so young, I don't have memories. My mother's father lived to be 94, and my mother's mother died when she was in her 20s. But then my grandfather married the nurse that took care of his first wife. And so I knew her. I knew the second wife, Granny, loved her. Yeah. So that was, they're all in Texas. So we didn't get out there very often. So I didn't have a very close relationship with them. And I envy these friends of mine that are grandparents now. They have such an active role in the children's lives that I never had any of that. So it's, I don't connect with the grandparents so much. I do with my parents that have both died. And that's been an interesting experience. My mother never feared death, but she wasn't wild about dying. She didn't want to go through any pain or agony in that way. So that was interesting to see her go through that, and then also to be the role of changing her pants and feeding her, and then trying to shower her, and she couldn't really stand up so well. That was challenging. But when it all started happening, I told her, I said, Mom, you are going to be greeted by a band of angels. And I'll tell you, I don't know where I came up with that, but it was such a beautiful thing to say. We both cried. It was like a very touching and something I believe it's whatever the angels are, she's kind of up there doing their thing. And with me too.
I asked because a woman I was with yesterday on the phone, she was a baby in the family and she didn't know her grandparents and I didn't know my grandparents either. Although my mother's mother, I visited enough to know that she was nasty.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that happens sometimes. It's hard to be pleasant when you're feeling horrible, you know.
It's true.
You know your own death is pending. Yeah. So you have to make a lot of it's okay to be like that.
But her,
Yeah.
my mother's stepfather was a saint. Her father had died when she was a kid, and she loved her father. She idolized her father.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think what I love about this discussion is that I hear in all three of us the look at the blessings I've seen.
Yes.
And that's an important thing, because life isn't always blessings, and the people that go before us are not always blessings. You know, people have to emerge out of sometimes extremely abusive spaces, but that doesn't mean that we haven't also been blessed with those folks who have somehow spoken into our hearts in some ways or another and helped us to see more than just this, and that those voices continue to speak. That's at least part of what we're going to talk about next week as we go into heroes. Is it's going to be who helped you to see a higher way. But almost all of the ones who are that are speaking beyond the veil, they are speaking there because they were in some way or another angels that helped us somehow in life. And that's an important thing for us to recognize and celebrate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you, when is it that those voices have been easiest for you to listen to them? What was happening that allowed you to be open to the voices? Or, you know, how did it happen that suddenly that became, now I hear?
Well, like this morning, I think when you have a question that you're mulling over something, it kind of helps me to offer it up to the council of people that have died before me, and get their reactions. Or how am I doing? Am I on the right path? What's going on here? And you kind of I can hear their response, and that's helpful. You know, in this chapter, Judith, did you read our chapter?
And Judy West just came in as well, Judith, just so you know.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Okay.
You mean the listening beyond the veil? Yeah, sure. I read the chapter.
Yeah. Well, on page 152, that try this, she says, close your eyes and imagine yourself in a special locale. Walk into the locale, imagining that you have, you know, you've got this rendezvous with the spirits. And I like that kind of creativity that Julia Cameron brings to all of her books, but especially this chapter when, you know, they're gone, but they're not gone. It's been, I don't know, 25 years since my mother passed, and yet she seems so with me now that I can take an easy walk with her. And, you know, then even Jesus, even though he's been gone 2,000 years, I liked it, you know, what would Jesus do kind of thing. That helps me too.
Yeah. Yeah. What you just said a little while ago reminded me of the end of the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, where it says, we're surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. And I think about my ancestors, and I don't mean just the physical ones who gave birth to my body. I mean the ones who also somehow spoke to my soul. Those witnesses are essential for my understanding of the world, because they've helped me they've whispered the truth to me. They continue to whisper the truth to me.
Mm-hmm.
when I did that with the spirit guide, it told me to be happy.
Uh-huh.
And then I forgot to thank it until I read her saying that.
You feel that you're happy?
Yeah, that's all it said. Be happy.
Judy, how are you today? How have your witnesses, your ancestors spoken to you?
They don't. That's why I was interested in listening to what you guys have to say, because this doesn't resonate with, these two chapters didn't resonate with me at all. I don't have dead people around me. I don't have dead people, I don't know. The closest person I've ever had that I've had felt I had any kind of spiritual connection with is Jesus, probably. And I kind of felt his presence a few times in my life. But other than that, I mean, I enjoy going through pictures of family, I've got history of my ancestors back forever, but it just doesn't. I'm just interested in what you guys have to say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
It's all right, because one thing that I noticed is that as I was reading through the chapter, the way she spoke about it, this isn't really the right term, but it felt more seance-y to me. and I don't experience my ancestors in any kind of a seance type of way. That's not how I experience that. But I do have that sense of presence. Sometimes it's by reading my grandfather's poetry and hearing his voice that way. Mm-hmm. It's a very different way than what I think Julie Cameron experiences it. And so how you've experienced or not experienced it, I don't want to say that it's right or wrong, because there's lots of ways to be able to do this work.
I think this is a setting where we don't need to apologize for being how we are either.
That's right. That's right. Because I know at least one of the ways, Judy, that you hear the voices of the dead is you do study. And you read the written works that somebody has left behind them. And they might be dead already and they might still be alive, but you hear the wisdom of the ages through that. And that's a valid way to be able to hear beyond the veil.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but I like that. Yeah, because I do read. I'm reading a lot of wisdom text right now. So it's like going through and reading wisdom, sacred books from way back and stuff. I find that fascinating.
Can you share a title, Judy?
You know what? Today is a brain fog day for me. We just have been moving some stuff out of my apartment this afternoon and doing a few errands and stuff. And I'm feeling very, very overwhelmed with the move right now. So I'm like, I'm not in a real, I can't think right now, I just can't. I'm sorry.
So let me just probe just a little bit, not to make you think beyond yourself, but just so are you reading wisdom texts that are more along the lines of like Psalm and Proverbs from the Old Testament, or some of the Apocrypha texts that are more like that? Or is it more the mysticals that John is teaching, right? That type of.
I really did a lot of research into the mystics, and that got me into that. But I'm also I'm doing some stuff with Borg and who else? Howard Thurman. Mm-hmm. A lot of Howard Thurman.
Those are good beyond the veil people to listen to.
Is he American?
I really like Thurman. He speaks to me. He's a modern mystic.
He is a modern mystic.
And I just really do appreciate everything. His meditations are just, and there's a bunch of stuff on YouTube on him too. And then I'm reading a bunch on him. So yeah, Thurman is one of my spiritual guides, I guess, written out.
So Nancy,
Okay.
to
You
answer
have
your
Lisa-
question, he was an American,
Yeah.
African-American man from he died at 60s, 70s, some maybe 80s, but somewhere in there. His most famous text was made into the song "I Am the Light of the World."
Okay.
Oh,
That's that.
do you own any of his I could borrow? This is Judith.
Yeah, I have to remember where they're at, but yeah, I can find one or two.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I can keep yours longer than library books.
Yes, you can. So I'll have it here, so you can come and find it at some point.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. But thank you, Judy, for reminding us that our ancestors speak in a lot of different ways, don't they? And we definitely do not want to in any way speak down how somebody else hears. One of our participants on Tuesday, on Wednesday, talked about a medium. I don't hear voices through a medium, but she certainly had, and had really good experience of hearing through that, right? And being able to honor how those voices come to us is a good thing. And too often, instead of honoring, we do a lot of policing, right? And limiting.
When you
That's
said
not-
heroes, I thought about Hugh Fraser right away.
Yeah. And that's where it's going to be leading to, is who are your heroic voices? Who are the ones who, as we, who are the ones who showed us visions and gave us ideas and set standards in our lives to be able to, like one of my heroes, and I'll talk more about him next week, was my high school track coach.
Oh yes, you've talked about him.
Yeah. And he was
Is he still
remarkable.
alive? Is he
He
still alive?
well could be, but I don't know. Right?
Oh, you should Google him.
I've tried and haven't found him at all, but
Oh.
he's not that much older than me, so he could be alive still.
He would love to know that about how
Yeah.
you see him.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But those heroes are important. The lady who died that I talked about on Sunday, whose pictures were there that I showed of all the classes, she was my first principal. She was my principal for 5 years. Phyllis Coulter is one of my heroes because of who she was, but also because of how she empowered me. Right? And those are good. Those are good people for us. So what do we do with all these voices beyond the veil? Not just in a personal way, because Julie Cameron showed some really interesting ways that she was personally dealing, growing because of these voices, but also her sharing of those also give us a glimpse of more, right? What's the right way for us to share each other's voices? Because you don't know my Granny May, and yet I think that you would benefit from knowing her.
Have you written those stories down, Jim?
That's a good
About the
question.
haircut?
I haven't. Some of my sisters have, but they wouldn't know the haircut story. So maybe I should write it down.
Or even just to tape it, like you're doing right now. It's already been put out there. That's a good start.
Well, and if we do it this way, then what we have to make sure we do on a regular basis is place ourselves in spaces where we allow those stories to be heard. And we give an honored space to each other to speak about the voices beyond the veil that are talking.
When my
However-
parents, we scattered most of their ashes in the Pacific, my sisters and my nephew and so forth. We were out there, and in the car on the way back, we had sort of this memorial in the car of sharing stories. And I learned things that I never knew. from my sisters who are 8 and 9 years older. So they knew my parents in a different time and space. And so that's another way, is like just having the opportunity. You know, life is so busy with moving, like Judy is doing. You know, you don't, when can you sit down and talk about these experiences? Well, at a memorial and in a class like this is helpful.
And I'm going to tell you, having done quite a number of memorials, and thinking that I'm a very wise person as I speak my part, you know, and everyone should learn what it is that I have to say. I've learned that the most important sharing that typically doesn't come from the pastor's voice. It is usually the other people who say, this is what she meant to me.
Mm-hmm.
This is how she spoke. This is how she lived. This is what
Yeah.
I carry forward. And that often happens around the snack table, right? Happens in the backyard as you're sitting and drinking a beer. You know, one of my favorite stories about my father-in-law, who died pretty quickly after Joni and I met each other, before we even married. And I'm sitting at Jerry's service, and a lady stood up, and people were looking around going, don't recognize her. And I could tell that she was an unknown quantity. And she said this: none of you know me because I knew Jerry in a very small space. He worked just down from Denny's there on Camelback. And I also worked not far from there. And every once in a while he would come in for lunch at the same time I would. And we'd sit and we'd talk to each other for that hour every other week or so. So that was her slice of his life that none of the rest of us knew. And yet suddenly we knew that Jerry was a caring enough man that he sat with someone else and got to know that person well enough that she came to his funeral because of 1 hour every other week.
I know when one of my close friends, when Wade was maybe 8 or 9.
Is that your son?
Yes, my son. I'm sorry. Wade, you know Wade. Yes, my son. And there were 2 other women that went through the master's program with me, and we all 3 had small children, young children. And so we studied together. So our kids all became really good friends. And Phyllis's youngest son went to a skate party. He was about 6 at the time, or 7, really young. And it was his first birthday party that he had gone to alone. And he started having an asthma attack. He hasn't had one in a couple of years. And all of a sudden he ended up dying before he got to the phone to call his mom. And that haunted her so much. And she called me and she said, the only person that we've got to talk at his memorial service is this priest. And she says, I don't want him to say anything. He never knew Matt. She said, would you write a eulogy for him? And I said, absolutely. And then the next morning, I woke up and it just literally flowed right out of me. And I don't have it with me because it's over at the apartment still. So, or I'd read what I wrote to you, but I read it at his memorial service, and I actually got through it without crying. And it was like it was a gift I felt I was giving her and her other son, Russell, and my son, because they were all very close. And, it was like, it just kind of encapsulated who this little boy was. And my son was just it was his first experience of death, and it was a close friend, somebody he played with all the time. So it was like, wow, it was just a very intense time. But so anyway, that's, it's like speaking at his memorial service meant a whole lot to me and to everybody there.
Yeah. Because that's a huge thing to be able to do, because you're trying to help each other through, in some ways, the blindest places we go through, right? This lady that I was talking to today was talking about a death she went through where she literally doesn't remember 2 weeks of her life, but was talking about all the ways that her friends carried her through that time, right? And I think that that's what we have to figure out how to do is help each other, not to see death as the enemy that we often put it into, but how it draws us into a different community than what we've ever been before, and how it opens our eyes to different things than we've been before.
In that love that you showed in writing that, not obituary, but memorial speech, eulogy, thank you. And I haven't moved today. I still can't quite get my words. Anyway, the eulogy, what a gift for you to have in your heart still today, I had to do a similar thing. A daughter of a girlfriend died and asked me, and how do you say no, but she was a teacher, and they filled the gym with all the kids and the staff, and she died in her sleep. So that wasn't anything we saw coming, and she was only like 52. So I did this eulogy I'd never done before. And I remember going in the bathroom and looking in the mirror and saying, you're not gonna cry. You are gonna do this, and you're gonna do it well. And it's like, okay, I got it. And I did it well. And I still feel her presence today. She was an art teacher, and we were really close when she was alive. For many years we taught together. But I have her picture up 2 or 3 places in my house, and I have her art that she gave me. And so I guess in seeing that, I don't feel quite so afraid of my own death, but I guess I fear more Mike's death and not being a widow, and what will that be like. But what gives me hope and confidence is the loving community of St. Francis. And I know that I will be supported. And that's really a great comfort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So.
When you talked about the supportive community around death, made me think the upper room this morning talked about elephants and how they gather around the newborn elephant. When it's born, the whole herd comes around to protect it, because it could be easily eaten by a lion or some other predator when it's little like that. And so the elephants protect them when they're born, and we protect them after there's been a death. Community is a neat thing.
Yeah. What is the upper room, Judith?
Oh, it's a one day at a time devotional.
Oh.
I thought everybody that was a Methodist knew the upper room.
Yeah, the upper room, it comes from the general boards. They send it out once a month if you want to get it. I'll show you how to.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
I love
I've never
this
heard of it
class.
either, Nancy.
Yeah.
This is helpful. I love, these titles, and Howard Thurman, all these people. I'm going to Google all this stuff. So it's fun how we get off and learn beyond what the chapters are.
There's brains, yes.
But Judith, I love what you said about the elephants, and I think it's the same type of thing, because death is a new birth of sorts.
Yes.
Right? For those that are closest, especially, like when the longer a couple's been together, the more, when one of them dies, the other one has to figure out, can this piece of me, because that rest of them was part of.
My sister-in-law said when my brother died, it was like losing her right arm.
Yeah, and so you are very, really and truly a different person than what you were.
Very vulnerable
at that moment, and you have to rebirth. And so to gather like the elephants around that at that time to protect this new creature, that's a good thing.
I know when after Matt died, Phyllis and Russell both were like destroyed. You know, it's like Phyllis didn't want to see anybody. She
No,
just
a
kind
little
of stayed
child
in bed.
dying.
She and Russell curled up in bed a lot. She had to go back to work after 6 months. She was a special ed teacher like I was, and it's so what I started doing is I sent her a note or a poem or something every day
Nice.
in the mail, and I said, and don't reply. You don't, please don't feel the need to reply or do anything. I just feel better knowing that because she was so depleted. And I said, let me just send you something every day. And she told me a few years later that she still had them. She had kept all my letters and notes to her and
That's so
stuff.
sweet.
But, you know, it was like it's like, I couldn't imagine if my son died. I was just like, you know, I understood, I totally felt where she was. And I thought the only thing, I would have nothing to give to anyone, but maybe I can give something to her to help sustain her through this.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you. All of this has been wonderful for my soul, trying to, you know, it's because we all have to figure out, how do we negotiate life, and how many during this last year especially have had to figure out new definitions of how to negotiate life,
How to navigate.
Yeah. Right? And none of us, I mean, it's definitely taught us that none of us have a perfect answer, right? But those voices can speak clearly. Like, I think one of the things I liked best about Julia Cameron's voices is they were the voices that were saying, "Atta girl, keep trying. With you, and you can do it." Right?
Encouragement. Yeah.
It's that encouragement that happened, and we all need that type of support, because they weren't trying to say, "We'll do it for you."
But you know, I've always felt like those voices came from inside me. But you know, it's like hard to know because I have, wow, I don't know if I want it. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to share something or not. But I've had an experience before where I've gone, well, I tried to commit suicide when I was 12. Okay, let's just put it out there. I did, because my home situation was so desperate and I didn't see any way out of it. But as I was losing consciousness, that I heard this voice, and I know it must have come from inside me or something, but I felt it. And it's like, "Judy, you are stronger than you think you are." I was 12 years old. Wow. And that brought me out of it. Yeah. You know, I turned off the gas. I took, you know, I just got everything back to normal and sat down and wrote out a plan on how I was going to survive till I could go to college, and literally wrote out a plan. But this voice, and I've felt that voice a lot of times in my life guiding me. It's like, "Judy, you need to you know, you need to like get a grip or something, and it's just, or, you know, try this," or usually in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Judy, before you came on, I told this story about a woman who I just talked to. And she was 12 years old when she had an out-of-body experience, a near-death experience, right? And those are the type of experiences that people often poo-poo. They say, "Oh, that doesn't really happen," you know? and here's my whole take about that and about what you just said. It doesn't matter if the voice came from within you or without. What happened is something supernatural happened where you were able to readjust your view of life because of that. And so maybe somebody's near-death experience comes just from within their own mind, but they talk about it separately. It doesn't matter how they view it. It matters that it changed them. And same with you. It gave you a different perspective of life. So don't discount that because it's not grandpa's voice. It's the voice of a wise one. Maybe the wise one that lives inside of you. Right? That's at least part of what the veil is about, is it's, the wise ones. So thank you for sharing that. Because it's gotten you a long way, hasn't it?
Still is.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for your honesty and your sharing today, all of you. These voices that help form us, those are good things. Next week, as we take it the next step and say, who became our heroes? And people become our heroes in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's things that they taught us. Sometimes it's models that they gave us. Sometimes it's the way they live their life, and sometimes it's just the opposite. I'm not going to do it because, they're the anti-heroes. That's the way they did it. That's the wrong answer. I'm going to do this opposite. And they teach us that way. There are all these ways that somehow we have learned in life, and trying to at least do some of that pinpointing of who taught us in one way or another. So enjoy reading the next chapter, and we'll be back next week to talk about it. Thank you so much for today. Any last words?
Thank you, and Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and sharing. And I'm glad you made the choices you did, Judy. We are happy you're here. So, okay, we will check back and enjoy the next chapter. Stay well, you all.
Take care, my friends.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.